السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. عاملين ايه اخباركم؟ ان شاء الله دلوقتي هبتدي 50 issues of modeling في بلندر. ان شاء الله هتعجبكم، فيديوهات جميلة جدا، والفيديوهات دي المفروض انها مدفوعة اصلا. تمام. انا هعرضها لكم مجانا، وان شاء الله تعجبكم، تتبسطوا منها جدا، تستفادوا منها. يلا نبتدي. يلا بسم الله.
Hey, Gleb and 80 here with the introduction video for 50 modeling issues from Hell, the ultimate troubleshooting tips collection for 3D modelers.
Let's take a look at the teaser and then we'll come back and we'll explore it further. If you just started with 3D modeling, you've probably realized by now that many things can go off the rails.
Even if you feel more or less comfortable with 3D modeling in general, there are always more things that can spoil the fun.
We definitely know that there are some techniques that we need to give special mention to, many thanks to your blends and emails and the general feedback that we get. And that allows us to really focus in on these same issues that crop up again and again.
So we're gonna name a few common modeling issues and let's see if anything from that list rings true for you. Ready?
A subdivided object collapses into a hopeless mess. The topology going haywire because you did something awful.
Non-manifold geometry drives people nuts, usually booleans are to blame, and flipping normals doesn't help.
Boolean ops seems to be the most efficient way to ruin the topology. Blender text remeshing turns out to produce meshes that can't be properly beveled.
Models explode due to some mistake in operating the modifier stack, or they can do it on render.
Bevels overshooting like hell, or not working at all.
The models exported to other software or to game engines just look ridiculous.
Want to see more?
Subdivision pinching resulting in garbage geometry and shading, self-intersections, subdivision surfaces looking like pancakes.
Heavy meshes that are so heavy it takes ages to move just a single vertex. Hello, photoscans. Poles twist shading.
Or it's just glitchy. And go figure.
Or finally, Blender just crashes and you lose all progress. It happens to Blender too. If you can relate to anything on this very brief list of modeling issues from hell, and at the same time you don't want to spend countless millions of hours on YouTube searching through various tutorial channels like ours for example, or Stack Exchange forums, you name it, then this video course is going to be for you. We believe it is the ultimate collection of the most common and some wild and rare 3D modeling issues that you're most likely to encounter.
Even though the number 50 has been mentioned, actually it's more than 80 mini tutorials that are available right off the bat, and there will be more to come.
Assorted chocolates of 3D modeling quick tips ranging from topology to glitch fixing. So these are chocolates you do know what you're going to get thanks to the full table of contents for this course on the Trello page we created and going to be updating for this purpose. Or just go to creativeshrimp.com/hell. So here we go. Are you ready?
Blender 2.82 and above. Basic knowledge of Blender such as viewport navigation and using the standard modeling tools and modifiers. This course is aimed at the intermediate skilled Blender users. Although we have tried our best to make sure it's comprehensible for the beginners, we're going to be moving fast. Maybe a bit too fast for absolute beginners. So this could be a problem if you don't feel familiar enough with the user interface, so just a little warning there.
We've put a lot into the course, but just for peace of mind, we want you to know that there is a 60-day refund available for whatever reason, no questions asked.
Enroll in the course now and receive all the future updates for free. Let's escape the modeling hell together.
Good, perfect. I liked it. That was good.
This is a pretty common problem. After adding the subdivision surface modifier, the model collapses. Well, to demonstrate it, first I'm going to enable the wireframe display within the viewport overlays, and I even have set up the shortcut for it. So I have assigned the semicolon button for the wireframe overlay, and at the first glance we may not see anything particularly suspicious. And what I want to do here is just smooth out the model a little bit by utilizing the subdivision surface modifier. What can go wrong? But after we actually throw it into the mix, the model goes completely haywire. And now it's a good time to panic and to increase the viewport subdivisions in hope that it would fix anything, but it turns out that it's much easier to just crawl out of the frame.
Hello, AD here. While that thing crawls out of the frame, I'm just going to jump in at this point and explain a little about what's going on with that. A bit of the confusion on how to tackle these, or at least the disappointment felt from the results of the subdivision modifier, stems from our expectations versus reality. True of life in general though, I guess. With these objects, we get what we would hope to. They are already smooth and quite curvy, and they have plenty of geometry already fairly evenly distributed, which helps to define its shape and keep its shape. Contrast these with the sharper objects and our hopes and dreams get shattered. The cube has almost turned into a sphere, and this cylinder, well, at least we now know a super fast way to model some sort of exotic fruit. Actually, this cylinder is especially bad because we have all these ridges bumping in and out caused by these poles. More on poles later in the course. But we tend to want to keep them away from the sharply curving edges, and we also have many edges all fanning out from a single point. Note that non-manifold edges, these ones not attached to anything, these hold the shape a lot better because there isn't further geometry to average the distance between, which is what the smoothing algorithm is basically doing. As we can see on this simple shape, the subdivided geometry more closely matches the position of the original edges at the ends, whereas these edges between the ends, well, we can see that averaging going on. The main takeaway then is that we need to spend some time creating some extra edges if we hope to preserve any sharp features. That isn't strictly true because we can use our creasing by selecting edges and pressing Shift E and then pressing 1 for a full value, but we might feel that's too sharp, and if we lower our creasing value again using Shift E, then again we're not quite getting the result we might want. Again, especially with the cylinder, because we aren't relegating those curvy sections to a more flatter, safer areas, as you can see on the version with the deliberate support loops. So with these details in mind, let's throw it back to Gleb to see how we might be able to salvage our subdivision squid that we got before.
Simply speaking, this type of geometry isn't a good fit for subdividing, but that doesn't necessarily mean we cannot subdivide the part of this mesh. So for example, here I'm going to add a bunch of loop cuts with the loop cut tool, and after doing this, to smooth out the resulting geometry, I will select those edges and the edges on the other side, and I will go right click loop tools while making sure that I have activated this add-on, and I will select relax, and I will repeat the procedure a few times to smooth out those edges. We can increase the number of iterations if we would like to. So that's the first way out of this modeling hell. Just work on the part of the mesh using the good old standard modeling toolset of Blender. Then we can probably alternatively experiment with the bevel modifier if we want to round some edges like that. The subdivision surface modifier is a great way of approaching different modeling tasks but it's not the only way.
And I'm just gonna jump back in again here with the main takeaway, which is that whatever approach we choose, if we want to retain our sharp edges on a model that we want to use the subdivision modifier on, so for example, we really want those more realistic corners, then in that case, we need to be adding some supporting loops either side of the original sharply angled edges. This is why the bevel modifier is a good option, but it won't work in every case, which is why sometimes, in some especially hellish cases, we need to get in there and fix up the topology with not manic knife wielding, but carefully considered splicing and dicing of the topology, which we'll be getting our hands much dirtier with later on in the course. So until then, please stay safe.
Whoa, that's a bad, giant, inflatable snail made of n-gons.
Sometimes when cutting a groove into some geometry, we might find that the resulting loop isn't so easy to select. And if we want to quickly change the depth of this groove or delete it altogether, then first we're going to need to be able to select it. And in this case, my edge loop selection tool doesn't allow me to select the whole loop. This one, Alt left click, easy peasy. From this side of the plane all the way to the other side of the plane, no problem. But since this one has these poles here, so if I Alt left click on here, it's going to terminate just at this point as it gets mightily confused between whether to turn left or right. And similarly here with this junction. So typically these junctions are called poles, so vertices that don't just simply have 4 edges sprouting from them. So we might call this one a 3-pole, and this one over here is a 5-pole, thanks to these 5 edges merging from it. So again here, if I press 2 to switch to edge select and Alt left click here, you can see it's not really sure whether to go down here or down here. It's not a huge problem in this case since we don't have a lot of poles, so we could just go Alt left click and then Shift Alt left click and then Shift Alt left click again, and now we have the whole loop. But if we had a lot of this staking around and it was a much more complicated mesh, then this might take some time. This is a simple enough solution though. We can just break out our select shortest path tool. So first we select our first edge and then simply Control left click on the final edge in that loop. And then typically with our default settings, we're going to get our whole loop. If the way the groove that's been cut in can't easily allow you to add support loops, then how should we go about it? Well, after we've selected the edge loop that has the pole junctions on with our pick shortest path tool, we can then press X and then delete edge loops. And it's as if it never existed in the first place. But I'm going to conjure that back into existence with Control Z and then plunge this loop into the depths a little bit with G and then Z so that we can just illustrate another point. So maybe you were thinking, this doesn't actually sound very hellish, just a little selection issue. But stay wary, traveller, for this road promises darker shadows will fall. That is to say, this is a kind of portent, a warning of things to come. So say, for example, we intend to use the subdivision surface modifier with this. I'm going to left click and drag across those to enable it in our view there. Tab into object mode for a cleaner view on that for a second. So with the subdivision surface modifier, one of the advantages of the good topology here for the subdivision modifier is easy selection. So if that's not working for us, there's probably more hell to encounter down the road. So for example, if we wanted to add support loops and tighten the corners here, then let's tab into edit mode and try and press Control R and left click in a loop there. We can see that actually our path is leading away from the main road and off into the moors. All right, exactly. So that right there is those darker shadows mentioned earlier. So let's rewind back to the start and quickly recreate that groove. All right, so with this subdivided plane here, let's switch over to Material Preview, or Look Dev as it was once known, just so that this doesn't blend so much into the background. And then what I'm going to do is press C to enter into our circle select, and then left click and drag across the edges that we want to snake our geometry through, and then right click and then just subdivide, and then we've almost got it. In fact, I can Alt left click on this and get the loop. But just to keep it all quad and get rid of these triangles here and these n-gons here, I'm going to take those two edges and then also subdivide those. Right click, subdivide. Pressing 1 to enter into our vertex select, we can see we've got extra vertices there, and I can join them with J, and similar there. And then just to smooth it off a little bit, I'm just going to press G and then G again to slide. And then somewhere around there, let's just round it off to 0.2. I'm going to type in 0.2 and enter. And then same with this vertex. I'm going to select it, G and then G again, slide down this edge, and then 0.2. And